how are you?
Fine.
Now, I understand you're about to be 89 years old, is that right?
On the cusp of 89.
Which means that you started in the practice when?
1954.
Now, tell us about where you went to college.
St. Peter's College, 1946 to 1949.
In Jersey City, New Jersey.
Absolutely.
And did you grow up in Jersey City?
Absolutely.
And you went to law school where?
Fordham University,
When did you graduate law school?
1952.
Now, you had the opportunity to serve in the armed forces.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that. What did you do and where were you stationed?
Okay. In 1942, after graduating, I was kind of floundering a little, and at that particular time, the draft was in service. And the draft years were from 21 to 45, but the Army was finding that the fellows after 35 to 44 were not qualified to be a soldier. So they dropped the draft to 18 to 35. And so Frank Addas, being a noble spirit, went down to the board, said, I want to be a Marine. And that was fine until my mother heard about it. She then went down to the draft board and put a show on, rolling around and crying, and Frank was assigned to the Army Air Force.
And what was your rank, Frank?
I was, within 9 days of being admitted to the service, I was a PFC, and I stayed at that for approximately 34 months.
Now, you had the opportunity to cross the pond, as they say?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So where were you stationed?
Well, I was stationed, first I had 9 days of basic training in Florida. I shot my carbine about 7 or 8 times, and then I was assigned to radio school. I went to radio school up in Wisconsin for a 6-month time period and had a delightful time. I never drank coffee, never drank tea. I used to consume 4 quarts of milk a day. And at the food at the cafeteria, they used to have a sign, drink as much milk as you can, but please return the bottles to the milk case. So I availed myself of that. So after finishing school, basically in Wisconsin, then I went to ultra-high frequency school up in one of the Dakotas. And then after that, I was then reassigned to the 39th Fighter Bomber Squadron. That was fighter planes which would assist in the bombing of Germany, protect the bombers, and that's basically what we did. So
you were in England and then Holland.
Went to England, stayed in Dunwich, and that was 40 miles northeast of London. And at that particular, we were on the North Sea, we were on a cliff. And so we had it was a prototype equipment which would identify a plane, say, coming towards England, and it would identify the degrees it was with reference to us, and also the exact location. Now, buzz bombs were in fashion at that particular time. So if perchance we picked up a buzz bomb, you would see a white dot on the screen, and then you would see a division of the dot. And the one dot would be going back to its source, and the other would be coming towards us. And we must have been on the avenue down to London, and it would pass overhead. And very frankly, we would call that information in or to a central station, and all that was plotted. One day, one of our astute guards started a fire at an overhead buzz bomb traveling south. And very frankly, fortunately, he didn't hit it because it would have blown up the whole station. Now, we didn't have a height finder, but the British had a height finder, so they worked in conjunction with us. And we also had a series of English Beaufort guns, which their objective was to try to shoot the buzz bombs down.
Well, what you're telling me and knowing a little bit about how you practice law and your attention to detail really presaged your ability as a lawyer, because you always had an attention to detail. When you went to take the bar, you were admitted in 1954?
Correct.
So you took the bar exam,
Correct.
and where did you start?
Okay, may I just finish the tail end?
Oh,
of
I
the
didn't know
Navy?
it was, sure.
And just so at least we get the whole story.
Of course.
Thereafter, we crossed the sea, and then we landed in France, and we were stationed outside of Aachen. We were about 6 miles west of Aachen. And then, of course, during the Battle of the Bulge, we were put on 24-hour alerts. Some of the heroes in our outfit were shooting themselves in the foot, so they would be disqualified from being reclassified. And also, whenever we left the station in a vehicle, they would always be questioning us, the MPs at Crossroads, as to, you know, what do you think about the St. Louis Cardinals? Do you like it? Questions to sort out whether or not we were Germans dressed up in American uniforms. And then we stayed there until they crossed the bridge of Remagen. The United States Army crossed the bridge of Remagen, and then we were then going to go to Frankfurt. And then, of course, President Roosevelt died, and then shortly thereafter there was peace with Germany. And at that particular time, all the non-combatant troops were going to be rotated through Asia. In other words, we were going to be reassigned. So while we were waiting for our assignments in these redeployment camps, each night we would take the 5-gallon can, and one of us would go to the PX, fill it with beer, and we'd have our fill of beer. But fortunately, Japan folded, and then we were then put on a ship, and then we landed in Staten Island. And while we were waiting on the ship, a very interesting incident happened. There were 4 women on the dock. Now, at that time, everything was censored. Our mail was censored, and I never relayed. I don't think I was writing home. I was convinced that I was not coming back. And we said, who are these people? And then we forgot about them. Ultimately, I noticed that all the lawyers were hanging on the rails. A card a piece of paper gets passed to me. Buddy, it's us, your mother, your sister, and your girlfriend. They were out there waving. How they got this special information, I don't know. I came home and then signed up for St. Peter's College.
Now, why did you decide to be a lawyer?
Well, Mother was my influence. She kind of suggested it, and I thought, well, let me try it.
And what did your dad do?
My father was a policeman, one of the old school, read his little Zane Grey books during the weekend, and then on Saturday, he'd go down to his uncle's tavern, play cards, and drink. And invariably, he liked to use his fist. He was a big guy, 6'2", 225, and tough. So he was the leader.
So you went to law school, and where did you start as a lawyer?
Started at Simpson Thatcher and Bar, Smith James and Matthias at One Exchange Place.
And they were, at that point, a defense firm?
A defense firm primarily, yes.
So that's where you sort of learned your trade?
That is correct, right. Very gradually.
Now, did you, as many lawyers, start in the county district court, not in the special civil court?
Oh, yes. I wound up to 100 and a quarter to 150 district court cases, and I spent 7 years in the district court.
Now, is it true? I recall you telling me you once tried a case over $17. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And also, we tried many, many cases, but it was very difficult to move cases. I remember one time I had a case, it was the 13th listing of the case. And at that time, to control the judges, there was no transcript, So we would have to hire a court reporter at $25 a pop. And so when Mr. Matthias, one of the senior partners, says, Frank, how about that case you're going on tomorrow? I said, yeah. He said, how many times has it been on? I said, this will be the third. He said, you mean we spent $300 for reporters? I said, he said, you better win the case.
Did you win it?
Yes, yes.
Now, you didn't have discovery back then like we do now, did you?
Very, 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 very limited. Very, very limited. But we had a Judge Fink who was a dream.
Al Fink.
He was wonderful. We were assigned a case one time. Steve Mangello was the co-defendant, and Steve was involved in politics in Hoboken. And there was a smart aleck from Essex County as the co-defendant. And so at that time, we could ask questions. And so my astute colleague said, Mr. Mangiello, you're a politician, aren't you? Judge Fink said, gentlemen, why don't you approach the bench? And we approached the bench. He said, Mr. Mangiello, what is your privilege? What would you like? See, he said, Judge, I'm a politician, so what? Let's try the case.
And how did he do?
We did fine. We did fine.
Now, you have a family.
Yes, that's
You've
correct.
been married for how many years to Fran?
Late 50s, probably since 1954. So that's 46, 57.
Okay.
57 years.
And you have a son who's a lawyer, but he's a deal maker, not a...
That's correct. My son is
Travel.
an investment banker with Bank of America. He practiced law in California for approximately 6 years at a big firm, and then he got siphoned off into mergers and acquisitions.
And your daughter's a musician?
And part artist. She is a licensed. She played the violin all over the world, traveled in Europe, lived there in 3 separate countries, came back, and then she then applied to Smith. She had been going to music school in New York, and then she applied to Smith College because she was living up in Northampton, Massachusetts. They accepted 2 years of her schooling. She then graduated from Smith College. She then got a master's degree. She now has her own private practice as a licensed social worker. And she is now, these present 5 days, she's studying art.
Right.
And she loves it. And she just had an exhibition up in Northampton. She sold 6 of her paintings, unframed, and she's flying high.
That's terrific for an artist. Now, let's talk about the difference between the practice of law when you started and when you retired in about 2004.
Okay.
What changed?
Okay. Well, the only qualification I had, after 2001, I actually started to fully retire from the by the English manner. I would take 1 day less after about 6 days, so I started with 4 days, 3, 2, and 1 in ultimate. So I really did not get into the best practices. I saw it looming, but...
Well, let's talk about the last half century
okay,
that you saw.
Well,
How did law change?
Okay, we had simple things like daily calls. They seemed more like social meetings. They would list maybe 120 cases, and I remember at one call, the 129th case was the first case that was ready for trial. It was a public service bus case, and that's the way, and then of course the assignment judge would see the lawyers, either settle the case or they would get a new date. The time periods for jury trials were from September to June, and during June, July 1st until early September, there were no jury trials held. They were non-jury and very, very few. also had another call whereby they had, cases were assigned at it. It really was a laugh. There was a lot of flexibility. I at times considered it like a social gathering. It seemed more like bringing the lawyers in, talk to each other, maybe we'll get some cases settled, but it wasn't affected. Motions were across the board. Always a court attendance was required, as opposed to, as I understand now, there's a certain class of motions that are determined on the papers. There was no classification of cases as far as the discovery being uniform, but meanwhile, there were various cases, some of them were involved, and they required special handling, and they just were put in the regular pile.
Now, I know you were, because I worked with you a couple times, you were a prolific worker. You would, not uncommon for you to get up at 4 in the morning to read a deposition and get home late at night. Tell us about a couple of either trials or experiences as a lawyer that you thought were either interesting or significant over half century of practicing.
Okay, you just tickled my brain as far as staying late at the office. I remember it was a winter time. I would get in at 7 or 7:30. I stayed till 8, got into my car, I got on the turnpike, and I got up to 15, and it snowed out. So I turned my car around, pulled into the first stopping place I could stop at, fell asleep in my car, got up at 6, and then went to work again. So I had some motivation somewhere along the line.
They call that a workaholic today. You think you might have had a little bit of that?
I think so. Well, you also used to sleep on the floor periodically so that I wouldn't have a full night's sleep, that I'd be able to wake up early. Other than that, I'm practically normal.
Now tell us about some either trial or case experiences that you thought might have been interesting or significant.
Well, I tried a psychiatric malpractice case many years ago, which involved a woman who married, had 2 children. She had just given birth to a new child. They moved into a development. All the roads were not yet paved, so it was dusty, and it was aggravating apparently to her, maybe having the new child. And she had been exposed to ECT, electric shock therapy, to cure her depression. She was discharged after 1 month in the hospital. I represented the psychiatrist. She had been home 1 weekend before. She seemed fine, at least as far as we could see. And then she was discharged. Within I don't know whether it was a week or a month, at breakfast with her husband, she said to him before he went to work, "When you come home tonight, the child will be in heaven and I will be in hell." Put the jacket on, off he traipsed to work. Goes back, he's doing his work, they're having a coffee break that morning. And very frankly, he tells the story. He said, "You know what happened this morning?" And he tells them. And they said, "You better get the hell home." He said, to see what's going on. He gets home, and on the floor, the newborn baby was killed, and the wife is flipped out. So that was the basic malpractice case. And their position was that she still had not recovered from the series of ECT treatments, and as a result, she was confused. In the case, we had 2 superlative older lawyers. I'm worried about the case, worried about the exposure, and they are arguing and saying, "Hey, you're asking all the smart questions, you're not leaving anything to me, and I'm the first defendant." So I said, "Oh my God." Anyway, ultimately, justice prevailed, and we got a no cause on that.
Very interesting. What year was that, do you recall? About?
I don't know, it was in Somerset County, I would say that's gotta be 25 years ago, 20 to 25 years ago. They also had a urologic malpractice case where a person had a blockage in one of the tubes passing the urine down to the urethra and out into the bladder and then out of the person. So we were going to make a cut on the side, intervene, cut a portion of the duct, remove the expression, obstruction rather. And however, because of the guy's size, he was a bull neck, barrel chested, very, very strong man. So it was determined that he would definitely need anesthesia. Now at that time, unfortunately, they were using reusable needles. And they had autoclaves in the operating room, which were supposed to sterilize the needles for their use. So he got the anesthesia, and we removed the obstruction. The urologic problem was cleared. However, he wound up from D10, which is about middle back down, totally paralyzed. An inspection of the autoclaves in the surgery room was disclosed. There were 4. 1 was not functioning. And so I represented the urologist. The plaintiff's name was Bill, I do remember that, came off a trial, it was Passaic County, and of course he's now on a gurney, that's the way he was carted in, and he's parked right in the center aisle. And for some reason, the judge declared a mistrial early on. We subsequently found out, fortunately for that, because his wife was also paralyzed. That may have had some sort of an impact. It was retried. At the end of the plaintiff's case, the urologist get out. But that was a substantial risk factor.
Now, Hudson County, when you started practicing, had a national, maybe even international reputation because of the politics, in the county, Mayor Haig and all that kind of thing. How did any of that influence the practice of law?
Okay, may I just go back to just one other case?
Sure.
It's got more a little humor in it. Or not necessarily humor, but a change. I was trying an automobile case before Judge Lana, who was an extremely strict judge. Plaintiff testified, the plaintiff's attorney in his opening had said he's going to produce the doctor. The doctor never shows up, so I'm thinking, okay, I got the plan, I'm going to say, I'll tell you why the doctor, and then make some comments on that particular factor. So I put a witness on, and then I rested my case, and I summed up first. And just as I finished my summation, Freddie Classics was the lawyer. He was an old-time lawyer, and smart. And he jumped up and he said, Judge, I have a motion. My doctor just arrived. I'd like to reopen the case and have him. And Judge Lana said to him, well, Mr. Addas, what is your position? I said, Judge, I'm here for a just result. I have no objection to the doctor testifying, providing I can sum up again. And Lana said, just granted. So I went up. They summed up the second time, a little modification, and the guy got a very measly plaintiff's award.
So your strategy worked.
Well, it was really forced upon me.
Well, it shows how you have to think on your feet as a trial lawyer, I guess.
That's true.
So tell us about Hudson County and how the reputation of Hudson County affected the practice of law from your observation.
Okay. I would say with the surrounding counties like Essex, Bergen, partially Union, we have similarities in it. I don't think we came in as being too offensive, and we were accepted by the bar. However, I do remember one time in Union County, and of course we had to travel there in the early hours to because the room where the cases were assigned for was locked. And you couldn't get in until the service was over, which I thought was a nice way of acknowledging those of us who had to travel are really not wanted. Monmouth County, I had a case in the trial list. There was a problem. I've forgotten what it was. I told the assignment clerk that I had a problem. He said, tell it to the judge. Tell it to the judge. Judge says case is assigned for trial. And I then went to the trial judge and I said, Judge, I'm really not ready. I said, I'll conference the case and try to settle it, but I'm not ready. He said, Frank, the first mistake you made is you told them that you had a problem, and we trade on that weakness, and that case is assigned out. Middlesex had their own little way of treating Hudson County lawyers. Your case would be on the call for Monday, it would not be reached, and finally Thursday would come around. And I used to call it Carpetbaggers Day, because you better get down here at 9 o'clock, you're going out. And we would sit in the courtroom or in the library all day. And meanwhile, where is the plaintiff's attorney?
In his office.
He's back in his office on call, doing work. And as a matter of fact, because of one of the cases where it went through the carpetbagger approach, we lost the carrier because they thought I was stirring the pot, because the case had been listed a number of times.
Now, Frank, did you
There's
get...
also there's a Camden story.
I'm sure you have, for all the other, but let's talk about Hudson a little.
Okay.
Did you have confidence that the judges, when you started out, were honest, straightforward, or were they affected by the political patronage? What do you think?
Well, I would say, number one, there just seemed overall there was laxity of supervision and requirements for a judge at that particular time. One time, I was trying a case that was a slip and fall from a Union City lawyer. And at 3 o'clock, Judge Smith, and he was always known to go to funerals. And we were going to sum up. And we did sum up on the case, slip and fall, discolored pea on the floor in a supermarket. And then the judge called us up to the bench and he said, gentlemen, do you have any objection to my clerk receiving the verdict? And I said, Judge, I can't suppose there's a problem. Who's going to resolve it? If you're not going to be here, you're going to be in the thing. So he said, all right, let's take a 10-minute break. He takes a 10-minute break. Who does he call? My partner. And I get a call from my partner, and they say, oh, Mr. Addas, there's a call for you. I said, okay, my partner. Let the clerk take the verdict.
So you learned the hard way, huh?
Hard way. And then we know that some judges at lunchtime, for somehow their disposition seemed to change after lunch.
What do you think it was, Frank?
I thought it was the air at first, that maybe it was polluted, and then I came to the conclusion it's something they serve in a bottle, and it's got a little kick to it.
So we had a couple of alcoholic judges. Huh?
Right, and also the way some of the judges handled the pre-trials was scandalous. You'd go, all cases were pre-tried. That was another thing. On Friday, there was no trial, no jury trials, and Friday in the morning with motions, and in the afternoon were pre-trials. And in many instances, the pre-trials generated nothing. Very frankly, there was one judge, he'd look at them,